Okay guys, so in this video I'm gonna walk you through acceptance testing and behavioral driven development. This is a follow-up on the previous video that I made about unit testing and integration testing, so hopefully you already watched that, and let's get into it. So let's take a look at an acceptance test. So basically what an acceptance test is a automated test that simulates a user on your system. And this is extremely powerful because what it will do is that it will simulate the actual interaction a user is going to have with your web application. And if you think about that, that's extremely powerful because what ideally what you want is to have a way to test what a user is going to do on your system and make sure that all of that is working whenever you save new code or you push some stuff to production and so forth. And the way that I achieve this is using Puppeteer, which is a headless browser that the Chrome dev team has provided to us. It's absolutely amazing, and a headless browser is just a browser like any other browser, but without like the visual aspects of it. It's just a program that is made so that you can simulate a actual browser without having to be like manually clicking things. So let's walk through it. So first and foremost, I require Puppeteer and I require the application, and then I declare some scope global variables, the server, the browser, and the page. And before my tests, I start Puppeteer with puppeteer.launch, which will give me a browser instance. And these are all asynchronous operations, as you can see. That's why I use the async await pattern, which is absolutely amazing. Then I use the instantiated browser to get a new page, and then finally I spin up the server by doing app.listen 3000, which is going to start my own system. And when my tests are all done, I will simply do async like I will declare another async function. I will shut down the browser, the headless browser, and I will shut down my server. That's the entire deal, right? That's the pre-work. Now, these are my tests. So the first test I have is that it should redirect to works.html if the login is valid. So using Puppeteer, I use page.goto to go to localhost 3000, which is the root of my application. Then I use the type function on the page object to select the input that has the name of name, and I input foo as the input. And I input bar into the password field, and then finally I click the submit button on the page, which basically this is what you're seeing. Like internally, this is what the Puppeteer is doing. It's inputting foo here and bar there, and then it's clicking this button. It's all doing that in a programmatic way. That's why this is so powerful. Then finally I say to Puppeteer, hey, can you wait until you see the h1 element, which is going to be the h1 element on this page here. And then after that, I expect that the page.title is going to be equal to works, and then I do an evaluation. And as we can see here, the title of the correct page is works. And if I now run this, you can see that it's working, which means that what just happened is that my server started, Puppeteer started a browser and simulated a user trying to log in with foo and bar as credentials, and then it saw that everything was working and it shut everything down. In the blink of an eye, I just did what I would have to do, what I would have to do as a human, and that would take a lot longer, right? And the other test is should redirect to 403.html if the login is invalid. It's basically the exact same test, but with invalid credentials, which will bring me to this page here, the 403 page. And that's basically my two tests. This is extremely powerful because what will just happen is in a split second I did the same thing as this. Foo bar making, oh sorry, I forgot to start the server. Let's start the server. So in the blink of an eye, here we are, there we are. So those two tests just did this. Foo bar went in, checked that this works, went back and did foo and fail, and saw that I went to the incorrect page. Now these tests are among the most powerful tests that you can build because they simulate the user working with your system, and that's exactly what you want. For if you don't write any other test, this is the test you want to write, at least for the critical parts of your application. So let's say that you have a web page, a web shop of some sort. At least you want to check that a user can buy a product on your web page. So you write at least one of these tests to make sure that a user can click a product, put it in their cart, and go to the purchase page and perform the purchase. And if that's at least working, then you know that whatever changes you make to your web page is, they're pretty okay, because at least the most critical part of your system is working for the user. Now, let's go to the next step, which is behavioral driven development, which is basically a higher level of doing these types of acceptance tests that is more, it's basically the same thing, but they're more geared towards cooperation and declaring specific steps as to how something's going to work. This is it's basically a higher level of doing, as I said, this acceptance testing, and it's proven really useful, at least for me. So in order for you to do this, you need to know about, like, the package I use for JavaScript based BDD is Cucumber. It's an absolutely amazing library. Please check it out. And I also installed the Gherkin syntax for Visual Studio Code because it's not supported by default in order to get this nice highlighting of this file. It's a special syntax. So let's just walk through it. So this is a feature file in the Gherkin syntax, and the way that it works is that you use plain old English to declare the steps and the requirements for your feature, and these are then translated into test cases. So let's walk through it. So my feature is that in order to see the application page, as a user, I want to be able to log in. So I just described what I want to happen in this login feature. And then you use scenarios to declare, okay, this is one scenario of what I want to happen if I do this, and I have another scenario for what's going to happen if I do something else. Let's look at the first one. I should get to the application page if I have a valid login. So given that I am on the home page, when I enter foo into the username field and I enter bar into the password field and I click the login button, then I should be on the application page. So this is my test. And what's powerful about this is that you and your stakeholders and your customers and so forth, you sit down together and you declare all these steps, which gives you all a real, like you're forced to think about all the tiny little steps that needs to take place in order for a user to achieve a certain goal on your system. This is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful ways to declare how a system is supposed to be working, because it forces you to be specific about what's going to happen. I absolutely love it. And then we have this other scenario. I should get to the 403 page if I have an invalid login. Given that I am on the home page, when I enter fail into the username field and I enter fail into the password field and I click the login button, then I should be on the invalid logins page. So let's run these tests. BDD. So now I'm running my tests, and boom, I just ran my test. Basically what we did, we used this text here, and I'll show you the implementation in just a moment, but what it just did is basically the same thing that we did earlier with the acceptance testing, but the added value are the steps that I have declared. Now let's look at those. So first and foremost, let's look at the steps themselves. So here are my steps. So I am the structuring given, when, and then, which are functions in the Cucumber package, and then I have a search just to do some assertions. So as we can see here, then I should be on the invalid login page. Notice that that perfectly matches this step here, and that's exactly what it does. It's what's happening is that Cucumber is regex matching this step here in my file and running this code. That's what's so powerful about it. And if you're paying attention, what's really cool about this is that if I declare this step and I write some code that execute this functionality within my system, I can if I ever write another feature file and I use exactly this text, this step is going to be matched against it. So as you go along, you can just reuse the steps that you are adding to your system, which gives you an enormous amount of power. Like after a few features, you're probably not going to redeclare any steps in your system, you're just going to reuse the old steps that you already have, which is much, in my opinion, much more effective than what we did earlier. Because when you're odds are that when you're writing a regular old acceptance test, you're just going to duplicate, most likely, steps that you already had from previous tests. But with BDD testing, you can reuse the stuff that you already created, which I think is absolutely amazing. And then we have another step here. Then I should be on the application page. I click the login button. I enter string into the password field. And basically what this is here is this text here. I enter a string into the username field, which allows you basically to declare a variable type. So as you can see here, this.page.type input name password. It's I'll touch in just a moment where this .page is coming from, but think of, like we saw earlier, that Puppeteer has this page object. This is the page object, and it's all it's doing is the same thing we saw in the acceptance tests. It's doing page.type, so it's looking for the input that has the name of password, and it's just pulling in that string, which is this string here, into the context of our function and executing. It's basically just typing that into the password field. And then we have, when I enter string into the username field, does the same thing. When I am on the home page, this.page that go to, and it goes to the root element. So this is behavioral driven development. So let's just look at the hooks here to just give you, for completeness sake. So when I start my acceptance tests, I have a define support code function that is being imported from Cucumber. I import Puppeteer and my application. So this is just a setup for running all of these acceptance tests, or BDD tests. So I do Puppeteer launch, and I basically put this into the browser object, and then I do browser.newPage, which puts it creates the page object, and then finally I create the server. And when everything is done, I close the browser, I close the server. So this.browser, this.server, this.page, all of this is going to be translated into what's happening here. So this.page in this file is the same this.page as that is being created in this bootstrapping file. Just to keep things simple. There are more things that we could talk about, but that's the basic of how it works. Now, what I find extremely cool about this is that Cucumber will actually help me declare different scenarios. Let's say that I should get a welcome email when I log in. Given that I can actually just reuse most of this stuff. I can copy paste this because I want the exact behavior of this, and then I should get a welcome email. So notice that I reused all of the exact same steps as I saw earlier in my previous test, but I have now a single test, one scenario here, one step that isn't the same as what I had earlier. So if I now run my acceptance tests, I see that I have 3 scenarios, 1 is undefined and 2 are passing. I have 15 steps, 1 is undefined and 14 are passing. Let's investigate this a moment. So here we see that all of this, like these 2 scenarios up here, they passed without fail because they have steps and all steps passed. But this third one, it has, given that I am on the home page, this is passing step, this is that step here. When I enter fail into the username, this is the step here, and then like in the next one, enter fail into the password field. It might have made more sense if I actually did foo and bar. Let's do that. Let's just do it for the sake of completeness. So I can actually log in just to show you, like the idea is that if I log in, I should get a welcome email. It doesn't make any sense that you're getting rejected and you get a welcome email. That's a silly notion, isn't it? But now we have something that will work. So okay, so when I enter foo into the username field and I enter bar into the password field and I click the login button, then I should get a welcome email. That's the step that we didn't have earlier. So look at what Cucumber did for us. Undefined, implement with the following snippet. And you get this amazing printout of the function that you now need to implement in your steps. How cool is that? So I go here, I paste that in, and I should get a welcome email. So now I have a step declared, and I run the tests again, and now I fail, but instead of undefined, I have one pending test. Then I should get the welcome email, pending. That's what you're seeing here. So this is now communicating to me that I have another step in my scenarios of steps that should take place, but I haven't implemented it yet. And the way that I fix this is by doing the same thing I've done for these others. I just have to implement the logic that asserts that this step has taken place. And this is behavioral driven development. You just write these amazing these amazing feature files, and you can reuse your, like, as you solve each problem, as you implement each step, you can simply reuse the steps over and over and over. And the more you use these, the less time you have to spend on rewriting the different steps that needs to take place in order to execute different scenarios on your system. So hopefully this was useful to you guys. I hope I sold you a little bit on acceptance testing and behavioral driven development testing. These are, in my opinion, probably the most powerful tests that you can write because they simulate an actual user on your system. And I hope you have a great day.